Salam alaikum. For those of you waiting for a nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition joke, move out of your mother's basement in Barcelona and get some damn bitches, man. The Spanish Inquisition has become a byword for cruelty, terror, and tyranny, but this image is false, a distortion disseminated 400 years ago by Anglos, and accepted ever since. These aren't just some nationalist theories that get their sources from trustmeman.com. I'll leave the links in the description just in case. The Inquisition began in 1480. Spain, united by Queen Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. Spain was no longer just a label on the map, but a powerful new empire. Ferdinand and Isabella found themselves the rulers of a religiously diverse realm consisting of Muslims, Jews, and Christians. For them, political unity wasn't enough. They needed religious and cultural unity, so that the dream of Hispania could be born. So they pressured the non-Christian population to convert. Many of them did. Some converted but were practicing their former religion in secret. If you want to rule the strong, united realm, you can't have half of the population praying to a different god. We all know how that can turn out. So the Catholic monarchs formed the Inquisition, a tribunal to root out heresy and false conversions, hoping that religious unity would foster political unity. So yeah, that probably involved, shall we say, some advanced interrogation methods, and probably some burning at the stake. But, dear viewer, executing or banishing people for a different religion was extremely common at the time, and many heads of the state, such as the Medicis of Florence, heralded Spain's labors for the advent of a unified Christendom. So the now infamous Inquisition myth, which Spaniards call the Black Legend, did not arise with its formation in 1480. It began almost 100 years later, and exactly 1 year after the Protestant defeat at the Battle of Mulberg, at the hands of the protector of the Catholic faith, Charlemagne reborn and possessed with a jaw so potent that it could easily obliterate any Dutch femboy. Of course, I'm talking about Emperor of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The German Protestants were pissing themselves in fear of the Emperor's divine power, so in 1567 they resorted to Low German tricks. Where His Sublime Holiness the Pope had the power of the Spanish army at his side, the Protestants had a secret weapon, something far, far worse than any fictitious Spanish Inquisition: the Dutch.
Verwelkoming. Are you tired of dwelling for pennies under your feudal master? Are you sick of losing all your family and friends to the plague? Are you fed up with being married in the endless war? Well, then the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie has an offer for you. You can invest in our stones. With a contribution of your entire life savings, you can get a stake in all our endeavors. Silk in East Asia, tea in India, and species in Indonesia. All go to the glory of the Netherlands and the lining of your coffers. Buy your stone now, and we will throw in a special offer. With your purchase of 100 shares of Procedural, we will give you a free tulip. That's right. Tulip prices have risen so much that it is clear that they will never come down. With a single tulip currently worth 2 lasts of weight, 4 lasts of wine for vettels and net vet swine 12 vetshape 2 hogsheads of wine 4 tons of beer 2 tons of butter 1000 pounds of cheese a complete bed a set of clots and a silver drinking cup, voxstomp and tulips, the greatest investments, are combined into one with this offer. Mijn vrienden, what are you waiting for? Bij Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie stonk today.
Yes. The Swamp Germans were highly prolific in the usage of the printing press. It was no coincidence that the printing press was invented and spread fastest in countries more sympathetic to the Reformation. The Protestants fought with words what they could not win on the battlefield. So, with the help of their nefarious swamp-dwelling allies, the rebellious German princes waged the first propaganda war since the Roman Empire. A Protestant leaflet started circulating through Europe, penned by the fictitious Monatanus. He painted Spaniards as barbarians who ravished women and sodomized young boys. He further painted Spanish people as hooded fiends who tortured their victims with horrible devices like the Iron Maiden, which was actually never used in Spain. It is his work which introduced the world to an image of the Inquisition which has persisted ever since. The Spanish monarchy was unable to counterattack. They were good at wrecking Protestant armies on the battlefield, but they felt that using gay little printing machines was an unfair way to wage a war, and was not proper of gentlemen. Gentlemen fought with weapons, not leaflets, not with ideas. I'm now going to quote what Monatanus said.
This scum of barbarians, this mongrel generation, Spainers and ever have been the sink, the puddle and filthy heap of the most loathsome, infected and slavish people that have ever lived. Their more than tigerish cruelty, their lustful and inhumane deflowering of their matrons, wives and daughters, their matchless and sodomitical ravishings of young boys, which these demi-barbarian Spaniards have committed.
Maybe the sodomizing of young boys is true, but the rest is completely probably not true. The real Spanish Inquisition was actually pretty secular, a far cry from the mad zealots we see in popular culture. Popular culture, may I add, made by Anglos. So, although heresy was technically a crime, the image we all have in our heads of poorly educated priests in red robes judging a poor Moroccan femboy is wrong. The investigation was rule-based and meticulously kept in check. In fact, many historians have declared fraudulent a supposed Inquisition document claiming the genocide of millions of Amerindians. The persecution of witches was a frenzy that swept through Europe for 300 years. For example, if I wanted to get back at my harlot of an ex-wife for taking my kids away from me and filing a restraining order, I could just accuse her of sleeping with the devil and bearing his children. I could have her brutally tortured and executed and take custody of the kids. So you better reconsider our custody agreement, Carol. I could do this if I lived in England, Germany, Netherlands, or any other Protestant majority country. But if I was in Spain, the Inquisition would take a very different approach. Most inquisitors were university lawyers, and lawyers look for evidence. So when the inquisitors look for evidence of witchcraft and find none, they don't prosecute her. In what is probably the most based moves in all of history, the Spanish Inquisition declared witchcraft an illusion and nobody could be tried or burnt from it. So if the Inquisition was so lenient on witchcraft, why are they the universal symbol of intolerance, ignorance, and ruthless persecution? Well, because by 1650, Spain was not just a power, it was a superpower. In less than a century, they had risen from a dusty corner of Europe to be masters of the continent. What is documented is that 3,000 to 5,000 people died during the Inquisition's 350-year history, whereas in Puritan England, in a span of 10 years, from 1642 to 1652, 1,000 women were executed in trials. And in the Holy Roman Empire, 16,000 people were tried for witchcraft and almost 7,000 were executed. Similarly, in Switzerland, 9,000 people were tried for witchcraft and 5,000 were found guilty and executed. Whereas in Spain and its empire, witchcraft executions were few and far between, because belief in witches, ghosts, fortune tellers, etc. was relatively low. There is also a few myths and fairy tales about witches or haunted places in Spanish folklore. There are some, of course, but it seems that belief in these supernatural entities mostly reside in Germanic culture, as can be observed by the Brothers Grimm stories and a lot of British fairy tales. Okay. Now, I'm not trying to say that there weren't any witch trials. Of course there were. Most of Spanish witch trials happened in the Basque Country and Navarre because people there are just built different, I guess. In 1529, the Council of Navarre sent a special commissioner to inspect the mountainous regions of the Navarrese northeastern Pyrenees, where, quote, for a long time they had not known what temporal or spiritual guidance meant. The commissioner brought along 2 female, quote-unquote, witches, who knew how to discover other witches During the inspection tour, the commissioner and the two girls inspected the villagers for signs of the devil's mark in their eyes. This led to a number of witch trials. The commissioner arrested and executed an unknown number of people for witchcraft in 5 different places. The Navarrese commissioner turned out to be a bit of a dick to the locals, and the witch hunt provoked intervention by the Supreme Council of the Spanish Inquisition. The 30 people accused of witchcraft by the Navarrese Council were handed over to the Inquisition, and they insisted on inspecting the ongoing witch trials. The Spanish Inquisition issued guidelines in how to deal with these witches because the Navarrese were arresting people on hearsay alone. The guidelines cautioned skepticism against spells, which caused the most accusations and death sentences. They banned the confiscation of the property of anyone condemned for witchcraft. As the Spanish government did not believe in witchcraft, they paid more attention to re-educating the lying witches rather than issuing death sentence. The Spanish Inquisition did not always succeed in keeping the secular courts from dealing with witchcraft cases, and a failure to do so resulted in the Great Witch Hunt of Catalonia, resulting in the deaths of over 100 innocent people. But this wasn't sanctioned by the Church nor the Inquisition, and Catalans are just weird, so whatever. But this wasn't sanctioned by the Church nor the Inquisition, who actively insisted that the Catalans stop being retarded. The executions were carried out by local authorities or lynch mobs formed by ape-minded peasants. The grand myth of thought control by sinister fiends has been debunked by archival evidence. The inquisitors enjoyed a powerful position in the towns, but it was one constantly jostled by other political figures, like city mayors or lords. The HQ of the Inquisition was in Salamanca. They have the records of every single person tried by the courts. These documents were not intended to be witnessed by anyone else except the Grand Inquisitors themselves and their staff, so the record keepers had no reason to deflate the numbers of people killed or tortured. But after several historians read the records, they found that only 3,000 to 5,000 documented executions took place. These numbers pale in comparison to the 150,000 documented witch burnings elsewhere in Europe. Looking at the Wikipedia list of all named people who were burned at the stake for witchcraft, only 2 were Spanish. Funnily enough, most people who were executed are from Protestant countries, the 13 colonies, Sweden, etc., whereas the list is sparsely populated by people from Catholic countries like Italy. So why is it that Catholics are portrayed as retarded religious fanatics who burn women for telling them that the mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell? Here to answer that question is fellow niche internet micro-celebrity DogtorTheMeme. Please go follow his channel, he makes videos like Spain slander. Expect more spicy videos from him in the future. Reminder, if anyone else has a channel covering history/historical shitpost or anything, go join my Discord link in the description and we could work on something in the future. Without further ado, here he is.
The modern image of the Spaniard was created by their enemies, according to which they were greedy, cruel, tyrannical, and intolerant. All this embodied by fanatic sadistic clerics with menstrual cycle inspired get-up is simply untrue and slanderous. Slanderous.
Slanderous.
Slanderous. They were career-men who didn't even have to be priests. They were simply lawyers trained at universities throughout all of Spain. The real image of an inquisition is a boring group of men, dressed in boring clothes, droning on in a bureaucratic tone, Montanus eternally associated with the Spanish government and clergy, with the horrors of the Inquisition, of lashings, beatings, and hot tongues. But after a while, these stories began to get old and people got bored of it. The propagandists turned the stories of more ingenious sadism. The Iron Maiden was born in one of Montanua's pamphlets. He described a diabolical metal sarcophagus with spikes on the inside in which the unfortunate victim of the Inquisition would be placed, along with an array of other horrific torture devices. The Inquisition actually used torture very infrequently. For example, in the city of Valencia, out of 7,000 cases, only 20% experienced any type of torture at all, and usually for no more than 15 minutes. Torture could vary to psychological torture, beatings, and in some extreme cases, floggings, but never any of those freaky cock and bull torture shit that we can associate with the Inquisition. Inquisitorial torture was often swift,
Hi, Phil Swift here for Flex Tape.
clean, and safe. Torture was always means to get confessions and used as a last resort. Inquisitors were even was a doctor at hand to ensure that nothing too extreme was done. Of course, as with anything, there were exceptions and abuses of power, but for the most part, it was pretty tame for its time, and less than 1% of offenders suffered repeated torture. If we compare in the Inquisition to other tribunals in other countries, we find that the Spanish Inquisition has a pretty clean record. During the same period in the rest of Europe, vicious punishments were prescribed for simple offenses in supposedly progressive England. You could be executed for damaging shrubs in public gardens. In Germany, if you were banished, you could get your eyes gouged out if you returned. In France, you could be dissembled for sheep stealing. Yes, probably a lot of Welshmen died during that era, just for trying to get a girlfriend. The Spanish law had none of these bizarre punishments. They had a strict rule book that they followed to the letter, and those breaking the rules would be sacked. They did not roast people's feet, break them up to languish for all eternity, or smash their joints with hammers. In fact, only thing that the Spanish were smashing in the 16th century were beautiful Amerindian women in the New World. It's no shocker that the British envied us. I mean, just look at their women. As mentioned before, they never used the infamous Iron Maiden. One of the few Iron Maidens in existence was, funnily enough, made in Protestant Germany. The infamous torture chamber filled with all those freaky ass devices never existed. The Inquisition even had the best jail system in all of Europe. Well, probably the world, because I think you can imagine what Indian and Chinese jails were like. There were even cases of people being tried in non secular courts. Like, for example, they murdered their ex wife or something. They did not want to go to the normal city jail, so they purposely blasphemed so they could go to Inquisition jails because they feared the maltreatment they would get in the normal prisons. Yeah, if I had to go to jail with Jamal, I would be scared too. Inquisitors were questionnaires, sure, but they were restrained and almost enlightened tortures, skeptical about effectiveness of hardship and torture. So, in the words of the famous Hebrew prophet Benjamin Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings, and the Inquisition was based.
Don't even get me started on the Inquisition in the colonies. For one, the stories about the Spanish being monstrous to the people they colonized is also an exaggeration spread by Anglos and the Dutch. But that's a topic for a whole nother video. The Spanish colonies had 3 inquisitorial headquarters, one in Mexico City, one in Lima, and one in Cartagena. In all of the years of Spanish rule in the Americas, they only killed 150 people. Mexico City was the one that ranked the highest, with an impressive 40 people killed. On top of that, most of the 150 people killed in the colonies were either foreigners or white Spaniards. Because for some reason, every single history channel likes to leave out a little law passed by the Spanish crown called Los Leyes de Burgos, which are basically laws that say, don't be a dick to Indians. This law prohibits Indians being used as mules to transport minerals, allows them to do their ritual dances. Law 24 stipulates that Indians are not to be physically or verbally abused for any reason. That's an interesting one, but most importantly for the purpose of this video is that it is absolutely illegal for the Inquisition to judge or prosecute the Indians. Of course, you can look at this on the Oracle, the all-knowing Wikipedia. Wikipedia is never wrong, obviously. You can go check it. Good things don't last forever, neither did the the Spanish Empire. By the 19th century, Spain was sliding back into obscurity from which King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had rescued it 350 years before. Spain became yet again a backwater in European affairs. With Spain neutralized, England and the Netherlands, well, the Netherlands was also pretty insignificant by that time, England and France could stop complaining about getting repeatedly stomped by Spain and stopped spreading anti-Spanish propaganda. But the myth that they had built for the Inquisition is still alive and well today. The legend grew and became more and more divorced from reality. We have people like Voltaire, Dostoevsky, Edgar Allan Poe, all spewing about the Inquisition being a terrible thing and it being disgusting and gross. It's human nature, and in the words of Rare Earth, I'm trying to do a Rare Earth impression. It's human nature to simplify reality because it's too complex for our fragile moral minds. We all love a good story, even though they falsify reality. I mean, just look at all these amazing videos I post about Iberia. On the other hand, they allow us to project our own unpleasant traits onto an external entity. Same as the 16th century English believed that all intolerance was Spanish by nature, people in the 20th century could believe that all communism was intrinsically Russian, or fascist tendencies are German or Italian. When we know that we all have Nazi tendencies, I mean, just look at my Discord. It's more gratifying to blame our problems on hooked-nosed individuals who like shiny things. That's right, Minecraft villagers. As you all know, I am severely in debt, so consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. And this one is called Top 10 Genocides.